A Mexican immigrant with a remarkable backstory created a global nonprofit focused on fostering an equally likely transformation. Here to tell us about it is Dr. Alfredo Quinones-Hinojosa, chair of the Department of Neurologic Surgery at Mayo Clinic Jacksonville and co-founder and president of Mission Brain. Good morning, Dr. Q.
Good morning, my dear Anne. I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you.
It's so nice to have you back. So, since we last spoke, the nonprofit that you founded almost 15 years ago, Mission Brain, which stands for Bridging Resources and Advancing International Neurosurgery. So this is a organization that aims to basically make brain surgery possible in places where it typically has not been.
Well, I tell you, it began almost 20 years ago. I was just on my way here thinking about the history. In 2006, I went for the first time, and it was a simple act of going back to Mexico and doing something in a hospital with friends that I knew there. And 5 years later, we ended up bringing a very large team of surgeons, nurses, medical students, as well as technical expertise. And from there, a 501c3 was born. And so many lives have changed since then. I never imagined that we would be here where we are today.
Yeah. And so the aim is not modest at all. It really is ambitious. It relies on a global network of participants, of philanthropists, and professionals, medical professionals. And recently, your organization has gotten national attention, international attention, including coverage by NPR. Because of this extraordinary story of what happened in Sierra Leone. Can you tell us about that, the progress there and just kind of the recent breakthrough?
Thank you for asking that question. You are absolutely right. Our goals are global. We are ambitious. We are dreamers. But I do believe that if you dream high, if you put your 100 billion neurons, your 600 trillion synapses in each of our brains, we can make these dreams reality. So it began because a resident, Fatu, who is in the story in NPR, saw the need in her own country, in Sierra Leone, to have at least one neurosurgery because of her own family experience of lack of access to care, neurosurgical care. She came back, got in touch with us, got in touch with some leaders in the United States, including our foundation, Mission Brain. We realized that not only there's a lot of need in poor countries, but there are actually 33 countries in the world and without a single neurosurgeon. Sierra Leone, the story in NPR that was featured, it's a country with 8 million people and 0 neurosurgeons up until last year. Just imagine that here in Jacksonville, where we are, we have about 2 million people and we have over 40 neurosurgeons. So there are parts in the world that need a year in the world. We estimate that we have 5 million people, 5 million patients that need either brain or spine neurosurgical care. We estimate that we have a need of about 23,000 brain surgeons that are needed in the world to be able to provide that care. But it's not just the neurosurgeon. It's the fact that many of these places just don't have the resources, don't have the hospitals, don't have the people, don't have the equipment. Our goal is very, very ambitious. But I think that one step at a time, just like what we did in Sierra Leone, we can make those dreams a reality.
So the doctor that you talk about, Fatu Conte, she was a neurosurgery resident in California, and she had lived in Sierra Leone. She fled the civil war there, but she went back to visit. And this experience that she had with her own grandmother who had a stroke was that she was desperately trying to find someone to care for her. She needed a neurosurgeon. There was not one. And as a result, her grandmother was paralyzed and remains in a wheelchair because of that. And that was what inspired her to say, we really have to find a solution for my home country. And that was what prompted her to get in touch. So this doctor that was ultimately on the shoulders of Mission Brain, able to become a neurosurgeon, to become trained, and also to get the equipment. Tell us a little bit about, is it Dr. Elu Kamara?
Dr. Kamara, just think about this same deal. The story of his life, how he realizes that he wants to pursue medicine, and the only care that he potentially could give at the time was very limited. So he left, got a scholarship to go and study in another country. And then he was able to study and become an orthopedic surgeon. Went back and he saw that so many of his patients were dying of brain and spinal cord injury. And he says, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I have surgical principles, but I do need to train in neurosurgery. And that's where we connected also through FATU. And we ended up realizing that if we can provide the resources for him to go and train in another country, in this case, Morocco, where we had connections and we can subsidize it, we can help with financial resources. Maybe over the course of 6 months, a year, 2 years, he can get the appropriate training to go back to Sierra Leone and potentially save lives. And that's exactly what the journey that led him to now be where he is, saving so many lives and touching so many more.
And it is a complicated network that, that is required to get somebody that training. As you say, he's going to a different country, he's getting the training, but he also needs a stipend to live. There's all of these things. And then once he's back in his home country, he needs equipment. He needs the proper gear to do the surgery. And all of that is something that Mission Brain works to provide. The story that was recently featured was this surgery that he did on a 56-year-old father of three who'd been paralyzed for years. His name was Mori Abibu, and he was basically immobilized because of this mass that had formed at the base of his skull, and it required a very careful and long surgery.
So just think about Mr. Abibu. Just like him, there are many, many, 5 million other people that are suffering from diseases of the brain and the spine. And yes, he was dying of a very slow death. He was basically suffocating. He was almost like drowning little by little. You can take less of a breath every day, every week, every month. And it was very, very excruciatingly painful for us to see this because we knew about the patient. And luckily to the collaborative efforts also through 2 neurosurgeons from Stanford that were able to travel with April, who's the CEO of the foundation that we formed, which incidentally, April was a nurse who trained me when I was a resident at UCSF. There's a personal connection right there. April ended up traveling to Sierra Leone. We realized we can help. Not only we have the need for a CT scan, we need images, we need the surgeon. We got the surgeon already. Can we put it all together? Can we stitch different resources? And that's how this beautiful surgery that you see how this team saved the life of Mr. Abibu. And at the end, 6 hours later, you can see him after he had been immobilized, unable to move his legs for more than 6 months. 6 hours after the surgery, you see him wiggling his toes. And you see his wife going down on her knees, praying, thanking God for such a beautiful miracle. And it just brings tears to your eyes and it makes you want to do more and more.
The surgery was successful and it happened because of this remarkable training and opportunity. But the surgery itself shows just how difficult the challenge is and remains because during the surgery, the electricity goes out in the surgical twice. And it's a storm season there. And so the surgery is happening literally with headlamps. They're, performing this delicate, unbelievably precise surgery on the brain without the lights.
Can you imagine that? It was Dr. Sengu and Dr. Vaca who were some of my colleagues. Dr. Sengu was actually a resident at UCSF where I trained. So we're all connected. We are a small group of people in the world that are able and willing to do these kind of things. And they just have the small little lights on their head, which I was providing the light to do this delicate surgery in which you can touch something. The best way that I can describe this type of surgery is almost like disconnecting a grenade or a bomb, and you have to disconnect the wires. And if you disconnect the wrong wire, you can give the patient a stroke, or suddenly the patient can stop breathing, or their heart can stop literally in the middle of surgery. So these are very delicate, and it was amazing. The light came back on. They continued the surgery. The light went out again. It was really a tremendously, innovative surgery, but it was the spirit of the people that made this happen, and also the patients, the families. And it just really inspires you. It makes you realize that it's small things that we can do to make these dreams possibilities around the world.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to Dr. Alfredo Quinones-Hinojosa about training neurosurgeons around the world. You can join our conversation by calling 904-549-2937 or emailing firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. One thing that has been remarkable about the work of this organization is that you're able to do it not on the cheap, but through very little staffing and really prioritizing using the funds raised for the people that are in need or the doctors that are in need of training.
So in essence, we have over 2,000 volunteers around the world right now. We are in 29 countries. Last year alone, we touched 23,000 lives in 2024. This year, in 2025, we have touched already that many, half the year. And we have one employee, and that's April. That's it.
Like one paid
One
employee.
paid employee. That's it for the entire. But we have a network of volunteers, of patients around the world, of people that have the means to be able to contribute, of doctors, of nurses, of engineers, of business people around the world that they know they want to help. They just don't know how. So we provide the pathway. We make the connections. We engage hospitals that have the resources because there are places, there are poor countries that have hospitals that have potentially the equipment, but they also have lack of access for the poor, for the marginalized. So our goal as a foundation is to build those bridges. And as you know, I've been blessed in my life that I care for patients from all over the world, both at Hopkins and now here at the Mayo Clinic, that have the economic power to be able to open some of those very expensive hospitals in marginalized countries where we can bring poor patients and do those surgeries at no cost for the patients and of course no charge from us, from the surgeons. But I always tell people our secret is that we don't go and do, we go and partner with the local surgeons, the local people, and we give them the sort of connection and the dream that they can find solutions to their problems. We go there to learn from them and if given an opportunity to help and share our knowledge. And I think that's something that makes our foundation so powerful.
Dr. Q, people know you in a lot of ways, including, you were featured in a Netflix documentary. You've been the subject of multiple books. And so to some extent, your story is out there, but I do think it's worth reminding people a little bit about the broad outlines of it, at least, because yours is an immigrant story. And you came to this country as a migrant worker, essentially from Mexico. You entered without documentation. You entered without the ability to speak English, and you had very few options at that in those first years.
Thank you. And it's very easy for people to focus on my story. And I say, thank you for bringing that up. I've been so blessed. And yes, the Netflix documentary, The Surgeon Cut, Lucy Blackstead and James Vanderpool, the directors, did an amazing job telling our story, plus three other surgeons, by the way. And that, of course, was recognized with an Emmy and a BAFTA. I'm very blessed that I was part of that. But my story is like the story of many immigrants. That's how this country, this beautiful country, the United States, was built on the backs of ordinary people who have done extraordinary things to get us to where we are today as a beautiful country. And I think I've been blessed and I felt, what if I was to bring a little bit of my joy? I do remember as a young little boy seeing Americans coming into my small little agricultural communities to help us build the trains. And I saw how much they care for us and how much love they gave us. And I said, what if one day I'm given the opportunity to do the same for the other people around the world? And that's how Mission Brain is born in 2006 after I finished my residency at UCSF and I was already a Hopkins faculty. So yes, I am blessed, I am lucky, but the story is no longer about me. I'm just a person. I'm just a member of Mission Brain. Mission Brain is much bigger than any of us. I think Mission Brain is a movement in which people, young people, senior people believe that we can change the world, that we can make the world a better place. And we're doing it through access to complex brain and spine surgery.
Do you wish that people were more aware these days of the kinds of positive stories about immigrants who are coming to this country with very little?
I think so. Of course, I do love the stories of rags to riches, and we have many. I know at Mayo, I I am surrounded by surgeons and doctors and nurses that have their own beautiful, inspiring stories. And I call them the unsung heroes. I wish my story was not so, that was not worthy of telling the story in Netflix. I wish there were 1,000, a million series about immigrants, because that's really the people who build this country, who continue to provide extraordinary, support and inspiration for us to keep going.
Yeah. So, in addition to the Mission Brain work, you also work on trying to resolve brain cancers and trying to basically cure what is a disabling and sometimes deadly illness for people. How is progress coming on that front? I mean, that is a very real challenge.
It's amazing. You just reminded me, just a few months ago, we opened the first proton carbon center in the world that uses technology in which you can give a patient proton, and 9 seconds later, you can give the patient carbon. And I'm so excited about that because it opens a future in which we're going to be able to treat many, many cancers, hopefully with better technology. Now you ask, how do I link that to Mission Brain? My goal as a dean of research now here at the Mayo Clinic, as a principal investigator of a laboratory that has been funded by the federal government for over 20 years, is that I want to make our therapists accessible to the world. And the more innovation, the more intellectual property that we put, the more technologies that we license to industry, the more we'll drive the prices down of our technologies, and the more it will be accessible to the rest of the world. So you ask, Mission Brain over the last 4 years has done a hackathon. This is where we hack the brightest minds from around the world through the Harvard MIT chapter that we
This is
have.
the hackathon?
This is the hackathon. This is where we put people from all over the world and we ask them, how do you solve a problem? Let's say a patient is in rural Peru in the Inca Mountains and they need to come to Lima for a surgery. It's not easy. How do you provide the transportation? Now they have to pay for rent. They have to pay for transportation. Now they have to go to the hospital. What technology, what resources do you need? A bipolar, you need a microscope, you need this resource, you need screws to be able to fuse their spine. We ask our youth, help us come up with ideas that we can then put intellectual property, that we can then spin off companies, universal, access to healthcare, to this type of surgery is, I think, something that I aspire that we will one day have.
What concerns do you have right now in terms of funding? We know that that has been an issue at a lot of research institutions and a lot of, schools as well.
Well, I tend to be a very positive person in general. I know that the NIH, there's been all kinds of in the news because of some of the cuts that were made. But I believe that the United States, our government, our people, they still believe in innovation and research. And you probably saw over the last couple of weeks, more positive news have come out of our budget for the NIH, for our research, for NSF, for NASA, for our Department of Defense. So I believe that maybe what is going to happen is some of the expenses that we have had in research, specifically what is called the indirects. These are the monies that sometimes come to institutions to help pay for the light, for the building, for things like that. I think they may be reduced over time, but this is where we need to be creative. We as institutions, we as scientists, how can we do more with less? And I got to tell you, that's something that I'm also learning through these hackathons that we're doing globally, because we're putting people that are in marginalized areas with very little resources with those who have a lot more, and they're trying to find solutions that can be applicable to both. We're learning from that, and that is the future that I see us.
Well, it's amazing work that you're doing. Congratulations on the coverage that it's been getting. Congratulations on the success that you've had in Sierra Leone and elsewhere. It's great to see you again, Dr. Q.
Thank you. And congratulations to our team, the 2,000 volunteers around the world. They are the unsung heroes. Thank you for having me here to be a voice for all of them, but they deserve all the credit.
Sure. Thank you.